My name is Madison Thomas, and today I'm talking about the Paleocene Epoch. The Paleocene Epoch was a period in time that happened about 65 million years ago and lasted just over 10.2 million years. To put that in perspective, Homo sapiens, us, have only been around for 100,000 years. So that was a very long time ago. It was caused by something called the KT explosion, which is most famous for wiping out the dinosaurs. Not only did this explosion wipe out the dinosaurs, but it affected countless other species. The impact from the explosion caused firestorms and dust to cloud the sky, which blocked the sun, causing a lot of plant life to discontinue their growth. This lack of food, for many species, was detrimental, but the fact that these species were wearing off allowed for others to flourish. The time period before the Paleocene Epoch featured a more tropical climate, so it was hot and muggy nearly all the time. But throughout this time period, temperatures began to drop, and the weather dried up a ton, and this caused sea levels to lower immensely. With the increase in dryness, seas began to disappear. Places in the world that were once covered by water soon became large land masses, which are the continents today. The shifting of tectonic plates sped up a ton. Oceans began to grow and change, and what used to be one giant continent began to break off, closer to what we know today. Europe and North America finally disconnected, and Antarctica and Australia also parted ways. Now that we've discussed what was going on geologically, let's move on to the living creatures on land and in the seas and in the skies, our animals, and the plants and grasses that covered the continents. The KT explosion, causing dinosaurs to be completely wiped out, helped many mammals come out of hiding. Most of the mammals that existed during this time were similar to possums. They're called moon rats, and also hedgehogs. They used to be so scared because they were preyed on constantly, but with the dinosaurs gone, land mammals became the king of the land, essentially, which would pave the way millions of years later for our earliest ancestors to be able to flourish and thrive. Not only were there possum-like creatures and hedgehogs, but elephants, their earliest ancestors, roamed the grasses, and there were other preying animals that lived as well. In the ocean, whales began to make their first appearance. Fish have always been around, and so have sharks, but they were much bigger back then. There were octopi and squid and many other softer creatures, and you started to see the disappearance of the large round shells other than snails and crustaceans. But those that survived the KT explosion, such as crocodiles, lizards, snakes, and other amphibians, they were able to survive and flourish, but they began to have a variance, and different branches of their species came into existence. Same with birds. Now, what about plant life? Well, there were many forms of grasses, there always have been, and there were oak trees and trees that were able to bear pine cones and acorns. And there were also the earliest relatives of the rose family and the lily family. All of these plants made it possible for the existing species to grow and create variations within them in their family trees, I guess you could say. Now, how do we know this? How can us humans in 2016 look back before millions of years before we were ever around and know exactly what the time frame was, what was living, the kind of events that happened? Well, geology. That's how we know. We are able to date rocks, and we date these rocks based off of their compression, how pressed down they are. It's essentially like a lasagna. You can dig into the earth, grab some rock, and be able to differentiate between the types of rock and the fossils found within them, and that tells us how old the rock is. And once we find themes throughout the world, we can know what was existing at what time and the relationship between all of our continents. And also, how we're able to find out about events like the KT explosion that wiped out one of the most famous species in the world, dinosaurs. There's craters left behind. And if that gives you an idea of how huge that impact was, that millions of years ago it happened and still today we can see the remnants of it, wow. That must have been quite the detrimental experience, and it eliminates many questions for us. And like I said earlier, with the rock dating, you can dig within the craters and see how deep that impact goes. Not only do we know about this time period due to rocks and what we find inside of them, but also the shape of our continents. If you think about it, Pangea, whenever we were all one, was essentially one giant puzzle that was put together. And over time, as these plates shifted and traumatic events happened in the world, like the KT explosion, it began to separate into the continents that we know today. And not only do these methods affect the Paleocene epoch, but any point in time. That's how we know about everything throughout history. And with science, we can only progress, and that's very exciting. Thank you very much.